What's up, Chauncey, man? Welcome to Dad Edge, my friend.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. It's really good to chat with you. It's actually good to catch up. We had a fun time, and I appreciate you having me and my 16-year-old out to LA. That was a good time, man.
Yeah, how was the trip after you guys saw us? It was good.
It was really good. Yeah, we went down to the Santa Monica Pier. We worked out at Zoo Culture. That was
Hmm.
an experience.
Was it
Yeah.
a
I
lot
mean,
going on or what?
it was just my son, he really likes Raw Gear, which is that's who, the clothing line that he's affiliated with, that he owns. And then of course, like, he knew all about zoo culture, and he's like, let's go. And I'm like, all right, well, let's go. And we went in there, and I think it was like every single social media influencer, fitness influencer that probably is in within the LA area is having like their entire film crew that just follows them around, and they just do like one set on each machine as they talk into
Yeah,
cameras. That's their workouts.
yeah.
So
So it was
yeah,
a culture shock, probably, huh?
it was like a workout and entertainment value at the same time. So
Yeah, that's cool.
yeah,
Do you have to sign
yeah,
an NDA before you walk in or what?
right, yeah. I mean, you would think so, but it was yeah, we saw things that I don't see in typical gyms. So
There you go. Yeah.
yeah, man. Well, hey, let's actually start here, man. As far as how you grew up, and I always like to actually just start with the experiences that you had growing up, just maybe the family dynamics that you experienced, relationship maybe with your own mom and dad, just some things that you maybe learned growing up that was pretty unique to yourself.
Um, hmm. Well, obviously, I started acting when I was about 6 or 7, so I kind of fell into that in Dallas, Texas, is where I started. Me and my mom and dad lived there. Was born in Pittsburgh. We ended up in Dallas for my dad's work. He was a contractor. There wasn't a lot of work back east, so ended up in Dallas where there was a ton of work. And then my parents split up around that time too, 5 or 6, and we ended up in LA. We had met an agent out here to. They wanted us to come out and do some auditioning over the summer or pilot season. I forget which one it was, and we came to LA and never left, kind of. So my early life around that time when we were adjusting into Los Angeles was just me and my mom. She worked nights, graveyard, so I probably spent, outside of going on auditions during the day in school or whatnot, I probably spent most of my time alone.
So your mom and dad, they split up when you were about 6 years old.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah, and so what was the dynamics like as far as separate households? How often did you see your dad? How often did you see your mom? Did you split time between the two?
no, I was with my mom full time. I didn't see my father very often. I mean, I would go down to Dallas and see him, I think during summers or, here and there, different trips and things like that. But for the most part, I was in LA.
Yeah. Did you talk to him very often, or was he just sort of like my childhood? My dad was out, so
Yeah, no, I didn't have that experience, but I don't know. I mean, it was the '80s, so early '90s. I mean, we didn't have very much phone, talk on the phone, whatever. But I'd see him here and there, and that was that.
yeah. What about now?
Um, my relationship with my dad.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, we talk here and there. Um, I got a ton of shit going on, bro. I really don't. I don't really have very many outside of business relationships. I don't really have much time outside of my own family.
Well, yeah. I mean, plus your family's pretty big. Your immediate family.
Huh?
Your family's pretty
My
big, and
Yeah, my
actually,
own. Yeah.
yeah, and it's actually
Yeah.
getting bigger, so that's good.
Yeah. Yeah, I come from a background of a lot of people too, but very secular.
Yeah.
Most of my dad's family's in Pittsburgh. I got a ton of cousins there, and then my mom's side had 6 or 7 kids too, so and a bunch of cousins and stuff, but they're all spread all over the country, so
Gotcha.
not like a immediate close-knit family, you know?
No, I hear you. What was it like for you? You know, you and your mom moved to LA, going to school, spending a lot of time by yourself. And then on top of it, you know, you're going to auditions and that kind of thing. What was, if you could look back and remember what, you know, 6, 7, 8 years old really felt like, what did it feel like to you back then? Especially since I'm, I'm thinking anyway that probably most of your classmates that you went to school with, or maybe even friends, like they probably weren't doing the things that you were doing, like auditioning and that kind of thing.
Um, I think that it was pretty calm then. I had like a pretty normal setup at school. I hadn't started working a bunch where it was like really accelerated. So yeah, we went on auditions during the day, but it was pretty general, you know. I skateboarded with kids around my apartment building and that was that. I don't have a lot of like memories from then that I can pull on. Uh it was pretty standard 80s, 90s kind of thing, you know. I think that generation spent a lot of time by itself,
I
especially
know.
single parent households. We ended up I think they called us latchkey kids. Is that what it was?
That's exactly what they called us. Cause
Yeah.
yeah, I
They
was the
just
same.
left us and went to
Yeah.
work and we kind of fended for ourselves.
Yeah. I was the same. You know, it was just me and my mom for a good amount of, you know, from the ages of the time, especially when I was 9 to 12. I spent
Yeah.
a ton of time by myself because that's when my mom and second her second husband, they divorced. And I remember it's kind of interesting. I have a 10-year-old now. And even though he's the third born and you're more laid back with, you know, when you have multiple kids, like I really can't fathom just leaving him home by himself just yet. But
Yeah.
I mean, I was doing that. I was doing that at 9, you know, it just, you know, I'd
Yeah.
come home and my mom wasn't home from work for another several hours. But yeah, we were latchkey kids. That's exactly what they called us.
Yeah. I mean, I think by the time I was like 10 or 11, I was kind of like completely self-sufficient.
Yeah.
I just kind of came back if I wanted to.
Yeah.
And if not, I was going to be off on my own doing whatever, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can't imagine. I mean, my 21-year-old now, uh, you know, I can't imagine her being on her own barely. So, and by the time I was 21, I was having a kid and had been out of the house for like 5 years probably. So
Yeah.
it's interesting the dynamic of that. Yeah. But I remember being by myself quite a bit by the time I was like 6 or 7.
Same. Same.
And you didn't
It's
really have contact with people. It wasn't like you were in, you know, if your mom was at work, you weren't calling her. There wasn't,
right.
unless there was an emergency, there was no reaching out to anybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You kind of just had to figure it out.
No, it's true. No one was accessible like they are now. And
Yeah.
even when like, so even like my 10-year-old, like when I explained to him, I'm like, you know, when I grew up, like the phone that people got a hold of you on, it was like attached to the wall
Yeah.
and you had to be home in order to pick it up. And he was just like, you can tell it's just like, it doesn't even compute for him. He's like, so wait
Yeah.
a second. Like, if I wanted to be able to get a hold of you, you had to be home. Like, what if you were out, like going to get gas or something? I'm like, yeah, you wouldn't be able to get a hold of me. There's no way. Like,
Yeah.
not a chance, right?
Yeah.
And
Zero. There was zero communication.
yeah, there was nothing. And here, you want to hear something really fascinating? So my oldest son, the one that you didn't meet, he's 17. He's gonna be 18 here soon. But he's, for some crazy reason, and I think you'll appreciate this, he's like fascinated with the 80s. Like he'll go on TikTok or Instagram and he'll search up like what was it like in the 80s. And the one that he brought up, and he brought up in front of us last night, was there was obviously a student holding a camcorder and he was walking the halls of his high school, right? And of course you see like all the 80s like fashion and you're like, oh my God, like what were we thinking, right? But here's the fascinating thing. It was a minute and a half long video. And I asked my kids, I was like, and I noticed it right away. And I asked my kids, I was like, I see something really interesting here. And I want to see if the rest of you guys catch it. And they all caught it. Can you have, do you have any idea what what you think I'm talking about?
What was the setting? School?
Yeah. Setting with school, high school, like hallways, kids passing, that kind of thing.
did people seem generally happy
That was one. That was actually one observation. The other observation was people were interacting with each other. People were
with
talking to
each
each other.
other?
And
Exactly.
people,
It's
the
probably very
big,
raucous
yeah,
and like loud as you walk through, because you can go back to those movies and see those those dolly locker room high school scenes and see how everything is interacting with one, right?
yeah,
You couldn't
exactly.
hide your face in something to get away from anybody. Everybody was one on one and interpersonal, you know?
Yeah. That was the biggest observation from both my older boys. And Mason actually was the one who said it. He's like, everyone's looking up. No one's looking
Yeah.
down at a phone. I was like, yeah, we didn't have them. Like, and
Yeah.
he's just like, everyone's like looking
Present.
around, talking to people and that kind of thing
Yeah.
versus that.
Everybody's
So
very present in the now.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
I do like that about our generation. Let me ask you this though about your auditioning experience and that kind of thing. Like, did you ever like when you auditioned, especially obviously for The Sandlot, because that's just an iconic movie. It's one that's probably going to live past you and I. But when you auditioned for that, did you have any idea that thing? I mean, here we are. This year is the 30th year anniversary of the
Yeah.
movie, and people are still just watching it. Did you ever think it was going to be this big?
No, I mean, we had no idea then. It felt like a cool project when we were shooting. It was a lot of fun, obviously. But you never know what something's going to be, you know? I mean, it could
Yeah.
feel great and end up edited bad and just bomb too. So, it's cool thing about The Sandlot is that the studio didn't have a lot of faith in David Mickey Evans, the director and the writer, although he's an incredibly talented individual and the whole creative force behind that film. We get the credit, but realistically, he wrote, directed, did everything on that film. But he had been fired from he wrote Radio Flyer as well and was the director on that film, and they fired him like 2 weeks into production and recast the entire film. And he had to sit on as a writer and watch somebody else direct his movie, which he says is the best thing that ever happened to him because he got a quick education. But going into Sandlot, they gave him like 3 weeks of of dailies to see if they liked what they were seeing, and if they didn't, they were going to cut it. And studios used to do that. I mean, I think the budget was $6 million in '92 when we shot it, which is a pretty decent. I mean, a $6 million budget for shooting now is crazy. So you can imagine a $6 million budget then was pretty good for a kids' film studio movie, and yeah, they weren't sure if they were going to let it ride. Obviously, they liked what they saw, and it ended up being a classic that's generated $1 billion in revenue for them. But you never know, He didn't know. And now looking back, I know all of this. It's interesting when we get together with the producers and the writers and stuff now, because as a man and entrepreneur, I understand the the stress, struggle, intensity that was probably felt on set that we have no idea about as a child, right? We're just in the moment, scene by scene, living that thing, and they're trying to create uh, a profitable, piece of time on film. So it's kind of interesting to look back and think of all the things that you've missed because of your childhood naivety, just kind of in the moment and not really knowing what's going on.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look back and you put those you connect those dots a little bit. And yeah, you're doing your part. You're in the moment, you're doing your thing and you have no idea really. We're just not aware at all those moving pieces and the pressure
How
cooker
high the
that's probably
stakes
there.
are,
Yeah.
the complexity of any situation. I think that uh, adults kind of, I mean, your podcast is about parenting, mostly centered around being a good role model and leader for your family. And we spoke on my show about you having those instances where you can snap at the children, and kind of what got you into the line that you're in now is having that moment. And it's like, as a child, we don't understand the complexity or stress of adult life, or the it's kind of like being a two-dimensional being in a four-dimensional world and not understanding all of these levels and things that are going on around us, right? We don't really, we're kind of focused forward and not really understanding that there's so much going on at every level, and it doesn't
That,
have to be that complex, but we make it as adult human beings, we make it that complex.
that's very true. Yeah, you have, as a kid, you have no idea how many layers are actually at play, right?
Yeah,
And it's not until you get older you're like, holy crap, like there was a lot going on there that wasn't even on my radar. You know,
at all.
looking back on that experience though, and I love the fact that you bring this you really bring to the forefront that it's just like, hey man, like I was a kid, like I was just doing my thing, I was present, I was playing my part and it was cool. And I think that there might be some gold there, just to uncover.
100%.
And what I mean by that is, at that point in your life, in that point in our life, the internet wasn't around, right? We're operating just a bit differently. And, to immerse yourself in that part, in that situation, and to play that movie, looking back on the creation of that movie, what were some times that you can look back and be like, you know what, man, like if I can recall one or two things that was just a blast to be around those other guys and that crew, like these one or two things, these were it. What would those be?
um we all stayed in like a condominium complex together, all obviously with our parents, and it was just kind of like a surreal experience altogether because there's not too many opportunities in life that you go travel somewhere. You're doing production of a film with nine other people that are, 10 to 14 years old with their families, also the dynamic of that, on a major motion picture set, and you're basically living together in these settings, while you're shooting a film and based around a sport. So it adds that layer of like, camaraderie. Also, a very like, obviously it took place in the 60s, so the setting of everything is very primitive and kind of like real Americana, like real life. So I think that era was really cool because it was the end of that. By 2000, I think we seen the end of like real set building and craftsmanship in film. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's layers to that as well. But all of that stuff was actually built by hand, brought in, the tree that the treehouse was built in was trucked in and then added fake leaves to it to give it that appearance on the set.
No
The
way.
Mr. Myrtle and Timmy and Tommy's house was built for that. That lot stands as just an empty lot. Like everything was handmade, hand set dressed, painted perfectly to make it be vintage on top of vintage because it's supposed to look vintage for the 60s even. And it's like kind of like just looking back to the fact that you got to experience that where, there was this, uber level of uh just talent around that made this production that has stood the test of time is really, really cool.
Yeah,
They don't make movies like that anymore,
that's ex-
you don't
that,
have to, which is the whole
yeah,
point.
right.
But the fact is at that time, if you were on the film Hook, I mean, they were building pirate ships, bro. You were on a pirate ship, $100 million budget Disney film on a pirate ship, living on that thing. I had friends in the film that like it's a pretty cool experience as a child to get to live out these real fantasies and sci-fi fantasies as an actor.
Yeah.
And it was a cool time because a lot of cool films come from it because that was like the height of that. It was real enough, but not CGI yet.
Right.
So it might have been as real as film could ever be, right? It was nothing pure. It was still on film.
Yeah.
You only got one shot at it, but everything was really hand built and really done. So it was all like you could actually hold it. You weren't playing to a green screen yet or anything else. So it's a pretty special experience.
Yeah, I can definitely I could see where that would be a special experience. I mean, the work, the personalization that goes into something like that. My
Yeah.
my boys and I, this was quite some time ago, but we were watching the making of Empire Strikes Back. And
Yeah.
my kids, again, it's like this generation, they have no clue that like computer and green screens and all these things didn't even exist, right? And there's this part where Frank Oz is playing Yoda, and he's like literally underneath the set, like under the
Yeah.
set, right? And doing the Muppet thing. And my kids were like, why don't they just superimpose that? I was like, they didn't have that back then, man.
Yeah.
Like literally they had to build this entire like Dagobah system by hand. Like there was no computers that were doing this stuff. But there
Uh-huh.
was that realness, I think, like we watched the original Top Gun, not too long ago.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that Tom Cruise kind of brought that same sort of touch and feel to Maverick,
It was
because
amazing.
it was amazing. But they don't make movies quite like that anymore. And my kids now they see it, now they can see it,
Yeah.
because it's like when you watch like even I'll refer back to the Star Wars thing, like the prequels, like a lot of them are so computer generated that it almost takes that same experience as someone watching it away a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I guess you don't have to try as hard anymore, right?
yeah, yeah,
To get the shot or get the point across. So it kind of takes that element away. Not
right,
to take anything from, obviously we're in the creator era, and I think that everybody having access to this technology is an amazing thing. Obviously, one of the best times to be alive, because you really have the opportunity to be whoever you want to be and do whatever you want to do, right?
yeah,
There's no way that, if you want to have a message and get your point across, then you have an audience and you can do it. And that didn't
yep,
used to be the case. We got shown what we were supposed to be seeing, not getting to choose what we wanted to, kind of thing.
right. No, yeah, I agree with that. You know, the other thing too, I wanted to ask you about was just life after that, right? So the movie hits really big, and I got to be honest, like my kids and I, we've talked a lot about this, and I'm curious to know your answer on this, because my kids are like, because I've had an amazing amount of people on the show who are celebrities, and my kids have asked me, they're like, Dad, would you ever want to be famous like that? And I was like, I gotta be honest, man, I wouldn't. I really wouldn't. I was like, as far as how far dad edges come, like I'm is I don't need any more eyes on it. Like I'm good there. But like the thing that I think about, especially as a young kid growing up, right after you get done filming that, like the amount of attention, the pressure, people wanting something from you every minute of every day, like there's got to be some cool factor to that, right? But there's also an element of like, oh my gosh, like this is also exhausting, and I think a lot of people don't really see that. But for you, what was it like with the balancing act of like, man, this is a really cool experience, it's also pretty exhausting, like not being able to go places and people not recognize me and that kind of thing.
Well, fortunately for me, I never had that experience, because the film wasn't a huge success when it box office, and then I went and worked a ton after that and was constantly working, but I was never like a A-list actor, so I didn't really have that experience. I got the benefit of being involved in the business and didn't have the downside of it. We also didn't have social media then, so there was nobody hounding you or chasing you around. I
Yeah.
mean, to be realistic, you know, outside of Michael Jackson probably, and a handful of like major people at that time, there was no paparazzi or people. You went places where the paparazzi were. They weren't following you around like TMZ to find you at the airport or anywhere else. So
Hmm.
I think it was a much simpler time then. So I didn't really have that experience. Um, I had a great educational experience because I got to be a young man around talented, very exceptionally talented and complex male and female figures, professionals, and to be able to sponge and soak up and be a peer to these people. So they had to give you the time of day, in a sense, to where most of, in a time where Get Lost Kid was kind of a thing, and you had to figure everything out yourself. They didn't have that. you couldn't just tell me to get lost. So my opinions and my views and my questions kind of demanded to be answered. And so it was an interesting opportunity for me to learn from these crazy talented people, that were actual craftsmen at the time. There was no digital nothing. These guys, the guy pulling focus on a camera was an expert at pulling manual focus on a moving camera. And the guy lighting a picture or dressing a set or building a prop or doing wardrobe, these were masters of their craft that had had a career long of years and years and years to get to that level. So I don't think I had a normal home life, obviously, but my accelerating learning curve based off of being a peer to very talented, business-minded people was I mean, I probably grew up too fast, but at the same time, you can't take that away from, sending a kid to a normal school is not putting them into a billion-dollar business and letting them kind of grow up in that environment.
Yeah. No,
I
that makes
don't
a
I
lot.
don't like to say that it was it stole my childhood or it did this. It's all how you perceive things in life, right? Like
Yeah.
you get to choose how you feel about that. I would say that because I didn't have a structure to my education and because people had to answer my questions and let my curiosity roam, that my view of the world is much different than most people's, right? Because I didn't get told to mind my business or be quiet or speak when spoken to or these type of things. So uh, I was able to ask questions and shape my reality in the way that I see fit.
Hmm. I get the feeling you grew up a curious kid that wasn't afraid to ask questions.
Yeah, anything that I kind of get into at any point in my life, I would like research heavily.
Hmm.
Obviously from it wasn't so easy. You couldn't just go to YouTube and find tutorials on how to do things back then. You actually had to first was acting, obviously, and I've probably done every type of acting class, script analysis, improv, this, that, that is uh that is possible. And through that, obviously reading and you know, digesting everything I could about that craft and then moving on from there to other subjects. It definitely taught me to go learn by myself and figure things out. So it was a pretty cool it was an outliers, you know, I like that term a lot. I don't know if you've ever read that book by Malcolm
I
Gladwell, but
love that book.
it's a great book.
Yeah.
Great writer too, so good. But I love that the way that he puts that all of these things have to line up for a person to be who they are, especially somebody that we look up to as a legend in some type of craft. And I feel like, I had that opportunity by chance. I'm from Pittsburgh, some small town, and people that come from where I come from don't have the life path that I have. So for whatever reason, I ended up here and around these experiences and was able to shape this reality. Yeah, based off of being curious and wandering in my own direction. It's pretty cool. It's not the general, straightforward childhood, but definitely something that I'm appreciative of.
You and I grew up, I would say, with family dynamics anyway, somewhat very similar, to where that father figure really wasn't in my life. And, speaking of, I was also a very curious young man. I wasn't afraid to ask questions, but I also think that that was a need and a yearning for guidance and a mentor. And if I look back on my own life, like I can look back and put those pieces together now, but I was always seeking out someone who is going to help me navigate life or learn something new or someone who is going to mentor me. And I'm curious for your life growing up, was there someone or were there a few different people that were really remarkable in your life as it relates to a mentor or a guide or somebody who took the time to just show you a thing or two?
There's been so many, bro. I did have a stepfather in my life. My mom, all of my brothers and sisters are from her second uh, long-term relationship with my stepfather, Pete. He was around, and he was very present in our life and a good father. He has a bunch of kids as well, so it's kind of like the Brady Bunch kind of merging, you know. And then they had more. Um, so I did have that from like 10 till, you know, I was grown more or less. You know, there was a male figure in the house that was a strong role model. You know,
That's good.
my grandfather, my mom's dad, was very intelligent, bright. You know, like you're in the same sense as you had that grandfather figure in your life of a strong, successful man. My grandfather was way out there, bro. He was like he was a wild man. He was a superintendent in the Iron Workers Union. He built bridges all over the country. You know, iron workers are tough as shit. You know, they ended up in Pittsburgh because of all the bridges and work there. And you know, he was building computers in his basement in the 70s. He was like way out, like hyper intelligent, almost to the point of non-comprehensible. You know what I mean? He was so far ahead of his time that the shit that he was talking about and on, like spiritually and in computer science, was like, I mean, had he have been 10 years after, I'm sure he would have built one of these companies that are, you know, that we're so prominent in today. But I think he is probably a little too far ahead of his time and was so far out there with his ideas and concepts that people didn't really grasp what he was talking about, you know. But he was also another character that was different and didn't really follow the rules in any aspect or area of life and had no could give a fuck less what anybody thought about that. So I definitely think that these I gravitated towards like outlaw type figures, not necessarily in their lifestyle, but in the way that they saw the world and picked and chose the opportunities that were available to them. They were all kind of operating on their own accord. And I've kind of followed that path in life, I suppose, to where, you know, there was no structure of this is next, this is next, this is next, you know. So I got to know that I was capable of building what I want to, and that I was probably going to have to do it by myself,
Mm.
and following that type of that path.
That is a solid lesson that most of us never get. And I am curious though. I want to go back to your stepdad. There's a lot of guys, man, that listen to this show. And let me back up for a second. My own experience. You know, I had a stepdad from 4 to 10, right? Biological
Mhm.
father was out, stepdad from 4 to 10. But then after that, it became like just this revolving door of just dudes, you know, just, and my mom didn't get remarried again until I was 18. But even though a lot of them were pains in the rear, there was there were good things that I learned from probably each one of them, just a nugget or two, right? But for you, I
Yeah.
mean, we have a lot of guys who listen to the podcast who, bonus dads, right? Or they have a blended family dynamic. And those dynamics are not easy to navigate. And it sounds
Hmm.
like you had a really pretty positive experience with your stepdad. And I think what would really serve the guys who are in that situation and they're in a blended family or they have a stepson, stepdaughter, and they're like, I'm not exactly sure what good looks like. And looking back on it, your experience, what was some things that he did that were really positive that you remember that really helped move the needle and maybe your connection with him?
I mean, he's just a good dude, bro. He's a he's got my name tattooed on his arm from the time I was a child. He's just a big, huge, monster of a man, biker that is just a good dude though, good hearted, a big teddy bear, and he kind of my mom was seeing quite a few different people. There was a bunch of in and out, you know. and people she dated. And I learned later as I got older that, you know, she physically and mentally fought with every man she's ever been with. So I think he was the best at navigating that situation and stayed around the longest. You know, they had 3 kids together. So um, you know, early on, it's like, you know, why is my mom fighting with all these people? And then at some point, you take to the notion that okay, apparently they weren't the problem in a lot of those situations. Obviously, you know, what do they say? It's not, if you fight with everybody, it's not them, right? It's, you know, it's what are you doing to put yourself in this situation over and over and over again, and push people to this limit that they're combative, you know.
Yeah.
But no, he was a good dude. He treated me as his own, you know, and he had a lot of love to give, if nothing else. And he was there, and he was in your corner, and he would show up. And you know, I have memories of him on sets and traveling around, and you know, he was very present and active in my life, in a being there role. You know, I don't know that anybody could ever guide me as a child. I wasn't exactly guidable in a certain sense. You could drop wisdom on me, and if I chose to listen to it, I would. But I don't have the personality type. I never have that has been. What did my mom used to say? She said, "Yeah, from the time he was about 3, you just had to wake up before him, because if you didn't, there would be hell to pay for it, right? So if left unattended, you don't know what the fuck was going to be going on when you got up, because I was kind of just going to be doing my own thing, you know."
Yeah. So
And that's kind of that situation.
you were very independent.
Yeah, not just independent, but like probably mischievous to the point, like, imagine independence with like the ability to actually, you know, cause harm to myself and others with whatever I was trying to get into for that time, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
You know, we talk about these little the our kids, the little drunks that are running around our house, you know?
All the time.
You know, sometimes it's easier when they're not so capable,
Mhm.
when they're still in that mental state. When you have one that is super extremely capable, but still a little drunk running around the house, you know, chaos will ensue, because they're capable of pretty much anything at any given time, you know,
A functional drunk, right? A functional little
with a
drunk
lot of
person
energy,
with a lot of
tons of
energy.
energy.
Yeah. Not listening to guidance either.
At
So
all. Yeah.
yeah.
So,
So just to pull the gold out of that, you know, your stepdad had a foundation of just quite frankly being a good man, somebody
mhm,
who would give you his time, his attention. I think it's fascinating that he had your name tattooed on his arm,
mhm.
and the fact that you know a bonus dad, a stepdad. I mean that really shows that like, hey, I'm committed. So much
Yeah.
so your name's going on my body, right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a pretty especially for the time period too, is a pretty obviously I think we've evolved as father figures in all sense of the word, you know what I mean? But
yeah.
and in that, I mean, you hear the stories about the getting treated like a stepchild, I suppose, you know what I mean? But I didn't have that experience, you know. I had he was a solid dude and a solid figure in our lives, and I'm very thankful for that.
I think that's good because he, you know, if we're really talking to the guys out there that, and trust me, man, there's so many of them that are just scratching their head, been like, you know, how do I number one, how do I connect with this kid? Right? It's not my kid. Technically, sort of, you know, it's not my kid. And I'm not trying to replace their dad, right? That maybe they have a dad in their life, but I'm not necessarily trying to do that. And then of course, when it comes to like being present or disciplinary or like what can I do, what can I not do, what are the boundaries here? There's so many moving parts, so
Hmm.
many moving parts in that, right? And then once you start to have, you know, half siblings, right? Your mom and him, and now siblings are coming after you. It's like, well, it's like mine, hers, and ours, right?
Yeah.
And what do those dynamics look like? There's so many moving parts. I can't even tell you how many emails I get where it's a question around that blended that blended family. and those dynamics and how to navigate them. But it sounds like, for just to keep it super simple, like, the way this man was is he was in your life, he was committed to you, and that's what he stood for, and that's the way he was going to operate.
Yeah, I still have a relationship with his kids, his older kids, you know, my older brother and sister who were his kids. And then I have two younger brothers that were his from another marriage. And I'm actually going to see my oldest brother and sister, Shane and Stormy. They live in Colorado, and I'm headed there to Fort Collins for a Sandlot on Broadway event this weekend.
No way.
And I'm gonna get to have lunch with them. I haven't seen them in a while. And then my younger brother's picking me up. He's actually in Colorado now too, from the airport. So we're gonna drive and have lunch with them. But yeah, it's like a big blended extended family, and we've all kind of just made the best of it forever. We're not like as super close. Everybody's spread around, but we're all, you know, we're all still in each other's lives in some way, and get along and understand that life put us together for whatever reason, and
Mhm.
we made the best of it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, man, I love that. And by the way, if you're in Fort Collins, if you're into hiking at all, there's an awesome trail there. I think it's called Broken Horse Tooth Mountain. I think it's
Okay.
something along
Yeah.
those lines. Have you ever been there?
No, I've never been to Fort Collins,
Yeah,
but I'll
it's
be there this weekend.
yeah, it's great. If you get to hike, I took my 10-year-old with me on a trip to Fort Collins, and we did that hike, and it was breathtaking. It was really cool.
Beautiful, huh?
Yeah, yeah. You know, so now you have kids of your own, and
Mhm.
number 5 will be here this summer, and you're married, and you know, base, your experiences growing up pretty unique. Not only from, you know, your experiences as an actor growing up and now into the present day, but also the dynamics of being born in Pittsburgh, moving to Dallas, mom and dad part ways, move to LA, stepdad comes into play, um, older siblings that you're not necessarily related to, but now part of the family, and then 3 more behind you. And now you have a family of your own. And I'm always so fascinated to really just ask the question of, when it comes to marriage and that connection that you have with your wife, how do you go about making sure that that is something that stays front of mind? And then next question is, same thing with your kids. Like, one thing about parenting, right? I mean, like, I run this podcast, I have for 9 years, and I'm still an idiot. Still still make mistakes all the freaking time.
Yeah.
And but there are some ways that I operate that help with that. Like, there are some ground rules that I operate within. But for you, marriage and parenting, what are the things that work well for you guys?
Um, one day at a time, bro. I don't
Right.
I don't really have a solid answer for that. I can say that I'm committed in doing what I have to do to make sure that the ship stays afloat regardless, you know? And I definitely don't captain calm seas. Um, and some of that is because of my own, you know, idiosyncrasies, I'm sure, but I'll definitely stay at the wheel regardless, you know? And I enjoy being the captain of the ship, and and trying to lead them to, you know, a better life.
I'll tell you, man, what sounds simple to you in just the way of your operating system, believe it or not, I'm sure you probably know this, but what you just said, there's plenty of men who are checked out. There are plenty of men out there, man, they're just going through the motions. They're not committed, and they're just sort of physically there, but mentally and emotionally, they're not captain. They're not the captain of that ship, right? They're a passenger, and they're on the ride, and they have no clue what waves are in front of them or where they're navigating. And just the fact that you said that much, that's like those words and where your feet are planted and what you stand for and how you're committed. That's a lot. That's a lot more than others. And that's why I said before we even started today, the gold that comes out of these interviews are what is, quite frankly, somewhat simple to you from a mindset perspective is super difficult for somebody else. And maybe they're not even grasping it yet. And what you just said, I guarantee there's somebody in the audience and been like, and that's what I needed to hear
Yeah.
is that commitment.
Yeah. I think that it's easy to feel like a victim in life, and for whatever reason. But the simple fact of the matter is that we all get the same 24 hours in a day. And we don't necessarily have the same tools as others, but those can all be developed. You might not be as effective or as efficient. That goes back to the outlier thing that, some people have a path that leads them to a certain direction. And without all of these things lining up, they wouldn't end at the same result. But we are in control, especially now more than ever, of any aspect of our life that we want to focus on. And
Yeah,
it's our choice to either focus on it or not.
I
And not
agree.
to take away from anybody. I don't think that, I'm not one of these hardcore routine, you need to get up and do this, this, and this, or live your life like this or anything else. But I think that the first thing we need to do as men and as women and as adults that are leading children is to take responsibility for us having the control of the things that go on around us.
Yeah.
Whether we feel like we're not attracting these things or not, the laws of nature are the laws of nature, and the things we think about tend to arise in front of us. And people need to understand that we are bringing these things into our life, either by negative or positive thoughts. And you know, it that needs to be present and know that this is part of that.
Yeah. Isn't it funny how that happens? What we focus on grows. What we focus on expands. I do have one more question for you.
Yes,
And
sir.
this is a fun one.
Hmm.
And so I want to give the audience a glimpse into how you, if we were to walk into your house on a given Friday evening and we see your family doing something just hilarious or fun or whatever it is that you guys are like laughing your asses off, what are you guys doing?
It's probably really loud.
Yeah, same. Four boys, come on, man, I hear you.
um, I mean, we might be playing PlayStation together, or Wheel of Fortune on the PlayStation, or a board game or something of that nature. Or my wife and daughter might be making a TikTok or doing something goofy like that. But playing ball in the house with the dog and the baby running around, me and my son. It's definitely loud, but we tend to have fun together in those moments. And we enjoy each other's company for the most part.
Yeah,
So
man.
there's definitely some life and love there, and you know
You come
we get
across
to enjoy that.
you come across to me as somebody who embraces that loudness and that energy.
Yeah, I say that I would like it, that I like peace, but obviously, my household would tell you otherwise. That
Right.
obviously I'm attracting decibels, so it's all good, man. Kids don't have a volume switch, so
No.
they just
No.
scream when they're sitting right next to you.
Oh, they do, man. I'll tell you, it's interesting. Like before we had four boys, it's like when we had two, I was like, man, I just want peace and quiet. And when I had peace and quiet, I was like, all right, cool. And then we had four, and my house suddenly became crazy loud. And I thought it would annoy me. And it actually like I'm number one, totally used to it now. But here's the crazy thing. I don't know if you've fallen into this one, but if you're ever at home by yourself, which by the way, never happens, but when it
Mhm.
does, the three times a year that it happens, it's cool for like 15 minutes. And then suddenly you're like, well, what's going on? This is
Yeah,
weird. Like the silence is deafening, actually. It's weird.
it's, yeah, it's very somber
Yeah.
and eerie, and boring, man. I don't have any other word for it. I definitely tend to like get anxious and want to leave the house in those situations. Definitely a
Same.
doer. I like to have things in front of me. And
Same.
when it stops is when I get nervous.
Same thing. Same thing. I don't like idle. Like it just wigs me out. So, I know I said that was my last question. I do have one more, and this will be a quick one.
Hmm.
Um, so this year is the 30th anniversary of the Sandlot, right? It's a big deal. I mean, dude, this is like actually one of my dad's like favorite quotes. Like he's been saying it for, I met my dad, 18 years ago, and we've had a
Yeah.
relationship ever since. My dad is known for saying "You're killing me, Smalls" by,
Hmm.
and can't remember his name off the top of my head.
Patrick Renna.
Patrick, yeah. And
Uh,
but this is the 30th year, and people for now, a few generations, there this is an iconic, family experience movie that people quote, people never forget it. But how are you guys celebrating, if you are, the 30th anniversary of the movie this year?
oh man, we were on a tour all summer. We went to the Sandlot and had a huge event there. We do that about every 5 years, but I've seen the guys a bunch. We've done a ton. We went to Cooperstown and signed autographs there during the induction to the Hall of Fame. Walked around the Hall of Fame. I actually shot a podcast with a friend of mine there at the Hall of Fame, looking at our baseball in the movies section with the Sandlot in it. We've done so much, and it's such a blessing still to, after all these years, to see the popularity and the amount of lives touched just continue to rise with each generation. And it's such a blessing to know that this thing that we did together 30 years ago is now definitely will outlive us and will continue to inspire ball players and young kids to get out and get dirty and play and have a little bit of fun and get into some trouble, right?
I love
Maybe
it,
not
man.
too much, but some.
A little bit,
The
a little bit of trouble, man.
words of
It's
the
good.
great, Karen
That's
Allen.
right.
That's it.
Well, if any of the guys, listening, and by the way, congratulations on your success.
Thank you,
Congratulations
bro.
on the things that you've been working on being a successful entrepreneur as well. If men want to connect with you in any way, shape, or form, follow you on social media, what is the best way to do that?
Just at Squints on Instagram.
Got it.
You can
Yeah,
shoot me a DM, and I pretty much try to answer everybody. And I'm not hard to find if you want to find me. My social is I usually keep it blank until I'm like debuting a new product or something. But other than that, I'm always on or around. I see all. You can tag me in something. If you tag at Squints or hashtag Squints, I'll probably pop up in the comments somewhere.
got it. Well, guys, not to worry. We're going to have all the links in the show notes. You can head on over to thedadedge.com/, 463 for this show. Again, thedadedge.com/, 463. Chauncey, this was awesome, man. Thank you for coming on. And by the way, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for having me on your podcast as well. That was so much fun. And yeah, I look forward to deepening our friendship and relationship. And thank you for coming on.
Appreciate you, Larry. I had a
Uh,
blast.
Same here, brother.